Buckle up. It's time for the Champions of Cinema podcast.
Welcome, sports fans, to the Ultimate Cinematic Arena. I'm your host, Joe Walker, and this is the Champions of Cinema podcast. Fellow producer James Marshall and I are deep diving into the heart-pounding world of sports films, the victories, the defeats, and the unforgettable moments that make us cheer, cry, and believe in the power of the underdog. It's Season 3, Episode 2, and I'm here again with the Siberian Scorpion himself, reviewing Rocky 2.
Scorpion? There is not
That's as good as I
one.
could get.
There is not one scorpion in all of Russia, and you went with that. You could have had
It's
bear.
No, but I can't make...
Oh, it has to be an alliteration,
So,
right?
so,
Okay.
Yeah, rhyming. It's like a rhyming, or an alliteration, yeah.
All right, we'll work on that.
Siberian Scorpion, that's what it says. That's
not going to look good on my gown, on my walkout gown, but anyway. How are you, Joe?
I'm pretty good, man. Yeah, I'm all right. I've had a
Nice.
kind of nice week. Just like some nice things going on.
Yeah.
Some fun things happening.
It's been an okay start to 2025.
James, here's 5 reasons why people should watch Rocky.
In Rocky 2, Rocky faces the challenges of fame, family, and financial struggles, adding faith as a new theme to provide depth to his relatable journey.
The film delivers high-stakes, unforgettable rematch between Rocky and Apollo.
Rocky 2 celebrates perseverance and staying true to one's values to overcome life's obstacles.
Adrian becomes Rocky's biggest source of strength and weakness.
Double iconic montage offers the signature Rocky adrenaline fix through workouts and running through Philadelphia.
I think almost, I'm going to ask you a little bit later, but I think this might have, I want to know whether or not your opinion is, does this have a better montage than Rocky 1?
I was thinking that. I think it might have. So I think
it does.
Do you want to talk about this now, quickly, or later?
Go for it.
Yeah, I think, because the one, it ends with him going up the steps again. However, this time, he's got lots of children around him. I remember first watching this a couple of years ago thinking, this is a bit cheesy. It's like, why has he got all these, it's just doesn't really make sense. It just doesn't fit the vibe as for like a serious sports film. But when
Why aren't these children in school, James? That's what I want to know.
Right, exactly. Where are the parents? Where are the teachers? But when you think about it, though, it's like, actually, well, the difference is that between Rocky 1 and Rocky 2, he's really become more liked by his community. And he's he's got more of the backing of his community, and it's like
100%.
Yeah, and they're fighting again in Philadelphia, and people, I think, were inspired by his performance in the first film, and the fact there was a bit of, he was receiving a bit of hate after initially retiring straight away and not challenging, so not accepting the rematch, and some of that was obviously fueled by Apollo. But since after he accepts the rematch, he's massively involved in the community. The community really support him. So I thought that was nice. I thought that was okay.
He does become a hero of Philadelphia.
Yes.
A little bit after the first one. It's like you go from obscurity to, this guy's fight. I mean, imagine if we had somebody within our local vicinity who was going to have to fight, Tyson Fury, and you've never heard of him. You're like, who? And then after that fight, he's done really well. You'd be like, that guy comes from where I come from, and I'm really proud of that.
Yeah,
so,
if
you can see why.
Yeah, if Francis Ngannou was from Derby, he'd be a legend, right? He'd have a statue or in city centre. So
yeah, probably.
Yeah,
it would be all right as well. Yeah. I can imagine that. Okay, fantastic. So, just quickly, have you watched anything fun the last couple of weeks?
Finished the Matrix trilogy. Yeah, they're okay. They're fine. It's a complete story.
Yes.
But after the first one, it's sort of like some of it felt a bit preposterous. Although it's got good action in it. I thought like the choreography was good, but like
absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
What about you? What have you been watching?
I've been binging the BBC series SAS Rogue Heroes, which is a bit like a version of Band of Brothers, but British and, like a diet version of it. And the downside is that it, whilst Band of Brothers has a really fantastic score, to the whole thing. SAS Rogue Heroes, all the music in like the cool scenes is AC/DC.
Is it meant to be realistic? Is it meant to be kind of gritty, like this is how it was sort of thing, or
50-50? So it says it's based, it's all based on real history, but it shouldn't be seen as a history lesson.
okay?
So, but let's get ourselves on track and back in the ring with Rocky. We have we've covered Rocky 1 last week. We're now moving on to Rocky 2. And much like Rocky 2 does, we're going to spend probably the first 6 or 8 minutes talking about, how this Rocky 1 moves into Rocky 2 a little bit.
Yeah.
And what the differences are between the two. Get us started off. Talk to us about your haiku for this week. Get us started with what the premise of this movie is in only a few short syllables.
All right. Fraud or contender? Did you give me your best fight?
Mm-hmm.
Athletes died twice.
Yeah, I love it. I think that moment where Rocky goes to visit Apollo in the middle of the night after his surgery.
It's real.
And says, did you give me your best?
That's a real thing.
It is a real thing. Yeah.
Because
every athlete wants their opposition's best.
They do, because they know otherwise if it's a known thing, regardless if it's public information or not, whether the guy gave his best. So it could be something which only Rocky knows, or it could be something which everyone knows. Whatever it is, there'll always be mentally like an asterisk in Rocky's mind that I fought him. It was supposed to be like the biggest achievement of my life, but was it real or was it fake? Essentially,
I think that's really easy to feel that way after a fight, because I think maybe Rocky might think, well, I gave everything I had, and it was quite close. Maybe Apollo wasn't on his top form. I think there's that idea that Apollo doesn't necessarily take him as seriously as he needs to, and then it turns into a fight that Apollo's not expecting. But how did you feel about the first sort of 6 or 8 minutes being lifted directly from Rocky 1?
I think it's good. I think it's like, there was Rocky 1 was the film about exposition and kind of building the world, building Rocky and stuff. Like, but going into Rocky 2, we have that now. Like, we can just jump into it, and them in the hospital on their wheelchair, or the media and the press. I thought it was just such a great way to start the film and kind of continue. Even I watched these films for this basically a week apart, but it felt so seamless going from Rocky 2 to Rocky 1, because it is seamless, in the fact that it actually rewinds the last. It literally plays the last 2 minutes of the film. Of the first film into this one. But even without that, even if it just started with the shot of the ambulances driving to the hospital, I still think it would have been pretty good.
I think there's certain audiences that would be fine with that, because you would be like, oh, that must be the ambulance coming from the first fight. But I think that because Stallone wrote and directed the Rocky 2, and I think he intentionally did that 6 to 8 minutes to help ease us into understanding what's going on.
Yeah, I suppose, because otherwise,
movie 2.
Because if you didn't watch Rocky 1,
because you got to think they're three years apart, 1976, 1979. If you've waited 3 years for this movie to come out, you might be like, oh, why is the movie starting with an ambulance? Is this Rocky coming from another fight? Is this Rocky coming from, something else? You don't really know, but then you understand what it is.
We need that exposition
because of, yes,
sure.
I think that's really important. Just a couple of stats for you on this one. So budget this time, not 1.1 million, $7 million.
Woo!
The last movie made $225 million. This one so they gave us 7 million, which I don't know if that feels a little bit, it's like 3%. Is that 3% of the previous film's earnings?
But what money does Rocky need though? Do you know what I mean? It's not like it's paying a new star. It's not like it's
those t-shirts. Those new t-shirts aren't cheap, James. And he's got to pay for a chicken. That's
Jesus.
At least $4 million worth of chicken in that movie.
That Corvette, they had to pay for that.
It's officially a Trans Am. It's a Pontiac Trans Am.
Oh, it's actually it's a oh no, this is the one with the fuel injected carburetors in it.
There's no such thing as fuel
I
injected
know.
carburetors.
I'm using buzzwords.
Anyway, so this one cost 7 million, made 200 million, so it made a little bit less than Rocky 1, made about $25 million less, but
okay,
negligibly, but still a huge success when you think about it. IMDb rating of 7.3, Rotten Tomatoes rating of 70%. So we're doing pretty well.
So was that a higher Rotten Tomatoes score than Rocky 1?
Lower, much lower.
Lower.
Rocky 1 was 93.
Okay.
So we're actually trending down in both senses.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Well, it's not as if you think about Rotten Tomatoes, the whole it's a freshness rating.
Yeah.
How fresh is the movie? If you think it's a remake, it's a sequel that has a lot of the same characters. That's not really fresh. It's kind of maybe seen as rehashing.
Sequels are higher if it maybe like adds things, which is so I think of like Terminator 2 is often seen as like the best Terminator film because Arnold is much more interesting in it, and
it's more developed. Definitely,
it's just far more developed and stuff. So yeah, it makes sense.
goes from being a horror film, a sci-fi horror, to being a less sci-fi horror, more action.
Yeah, exactly. Which
is quite interesting. Okay, so anyway, yeah, very similar. Just a quick one. This took 8 months to edit.
Edit
months.
Is it because like did he like because when he gets into the montage bit, it looks like he might have like gotten a bit more jacked. So was there like a delay in the filming process because he had to like look the one way at the start of the film, and then by the time he's ready to fight Apollo again, he looked a bit trimmer. I thought maybe,
but
or was that just baby oil? Maybe.
I think there's an element of that, but then again, in Rocky 1, did you notice that in the very first fight against Spider Rico, he looks as jacked in that as he does in the final fight against Apollo? Did you notice that at all?
Yeah, so I guess they filmed it. Yeah,
they shot the Spider Rico scene after the big fight against Apollo.
Makes sense.
I think this one. Well, I think it maybe just took a bit more time to edit because maybe Stallone's not an editor, or they maybe shot a lot more, or they got quite a lot of information going on it. And how many takes did they have to have of Rocky speaking so reading so terribly? I don't know.
We've wasted 4 goddamn hours. We've
We're moving to the new set.
We've wasted 4 goddamn months. Oh my god.
But it makes sense. Let's talk. Oh, just quickly before we get fly into this 3-act synopsis, I have got a question for you.
Okay.
And one of the big sort of themes to the movie, or plot points to the movie, is that Rocky has to fight right-handed in the movie. Do you know why Rocky had to fight right-handed in the movie?
Don't tell me that there's a production reason. Oh my god. Okay, so for the viewers listening, like the reason in the film he has to swap, so he's naturally a southpaw, so he's a left-handed fighter, but Mickey forces him to fight right-handed because his right eye is his right eye got really fucked up in the first
Correct.
film's fight. So by switching southpaw, he protects himself so he doesn't have an exposed blind side. But that's not the reason why they've did it.
No, not at all.
Why?
So whilst he was getting in shape for the film, Stallone experienced almost a complete tear on his right pec.
Oh my
whilst
god!
He was trying to bench press 100 kg with bodybuilder Franco Columbo, Arnold Schwarzenegger's best friend. And so he underwent a partially successful surgery in order to reattach the muscle, but he couldn't fight with his left hand.
That's incredible. I thought like the film, like him. I thought, oh, that's such a neat like thing to add in, because I was like, oh, we can use this against Apollo. He won't expect it. And the 15th round, you change, and it'll throw him off, and you can win the fight. But no, it was because
Stallone was trying to bench 225.
Does he stay?
All of us want to do.
Does he stay Southpaw in 3 and 4, or what? What happens?
Yeah, I think he goes back to being Southpaw in 3 and 4. Yeah.
Okay.
It's quite kind of fun though, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's talk about the 3-act synopsis, and then we'll get into some general chat about this movie.
Yeah,
there's so much to talk about, but yeah, let's crack on with this one.
Sure.
Okay, Act 1: Recovery and Reflection. The story picks up immediately after the climactic fight between Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed from the first movie. Both fighters are battered, with Rocky retiring due to his injuries and planning a quieter life with Adrian, whom he marries. They move into a modest home, and Rocky attempts to live a normal life, taking on various jobs to provide for his family. However, his lack of education and skills leads to financial struggles. Meanwhile, Apollo Creed, stung by public criticism over the close result of their first fight, becomes obsessed with proving his dominance and challenges Rocky to a rematch. Initially, Rocky declines, prioritising his family and his health. Adrian, concerned for his well-being, hesitates to support the idea of him returning to the ring. So, in our 5 reasons why, we talked about this a little bit. I think that Adrian provides Rocky's most of Rocky's strength in this movie, but she's a force of weakness for him a little bit.
Yeah,
because he's promised her one thing, but then he starts wanting to do something else, and she's like, "But you promised," kind of thing. And
yeah,
it's a bit awkward, really.
Because for the lack of a better word, she is kind of his rock. I think you used that pun as well in the last episode, but yeah, she's kind of his rock, but also Rocky relies on her for stability, but also it's like that stability which is kind of clashing with his desire to stay as a boxer. It's kind of like there's this sort of pulling force from one direction that, let's just have a normal life. I can work at the pet stop, you can do whatever job, whether it's the meat packing plant or Gazzo if you have to, or working at Mickey's gym, whatever. But at the same time, like Rocky's realizing that he is built and made for boxing, really. So it's kind of like, but those two don't necessarily align with each other, and that's a real thing. That's the sort of that's sort of the duality of being an athlete, right? It's
on one hand you want to be able to provide and be the best husband and father possible, but on the other hand, you still yearn to be the best athlete that you can be, and you don't want to give any of that up.
Sure. But so it's something has to give in terms of either Rocky has to ultimately decide he wants to quit boxing, or Adrian has to decide that, okay, Rocky, I'm happy, I'm okay with Rocky maintaining fighting. And obviously, we've got about 8 more of these films to make, so so boxing it is.
Yeah, imagine if Rocky had sort of transitioned into being a businessman for the next 8 Rocky
films. Start a
and...
podcast.
Hey, yo, it's me, Rocky. Hey,
welcome to the Italian Stallion podcast. Today's episode sponsored by Athletic Greens. Use code Rocky for 10% off.
When I go on the internet, I'm always unsure what people are going to be doing with my information. So I use Surfshark VPN. Rocky having his own podcast is brilliant. I love that. It's interesting because, like you say before, there's this element of Rocky's having to grapple with this idea of not being an athlete anymore. He's trying to do things. He's trying to make money. He's having people come to him and say, you can make so much money doing advertising. And really what he needs is, kind of needs a coach to help him navigate that world. A manager, a coach that would help him navigate that world.
Yeah, it's like he doesn't have anyone to help him post boxing, really, or to do outside the ring stuff. He's got his wife. He's always trying to support him emotionally and defend him. And he's got Mickey to make sure that the boxing's done right, but he doesn't really have anyone else to sort of we see immediately like on his own wedding day that Gaz is trying to like rope him into some questionable investment opportunities.
Condominiums.
I don't use them.
I'd never use them. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, that's probably a line that goes over a lot of people's heads. I think that line, but it's a good one. Sure.
I thought it was brilliant. I think that this one has one of the best scripts in all of the series.
It might have actually been too on the nose if like Rocky was to say like maybe the reason why Rocky 2 why he gets back into fighting is because maybe Gaz like tricks him into losing all his money. I think that might be that could have been a bit too on the nose. Whereas him like having to like go into boxing because he's blown his money on Rolexes and Gucci jackets and Pontiacs might have been that's a bit more light-hearted, if that makes sense.
It is, but it tell you something. It is right on the nose as to what happens to athletes all the time.
True.
If you've watched that 30 for 30 broke, the fact that they go out and they immediately buy a car and they buy a coat with a tiger on the back, and Adrian's sensible with the money. She's asking about whether or not the house has got copper pipes throughout.
Yeah, mortgage. How is the mortgage going to work? Like, what can the bank offer us and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we can just buy it outright. We'll take it.
Whereas Rocky's looking at the front room and he's like, "That'd be a great place for a bag right there."
Like, I don't even need to see upstairs. We'll take it. It's just like, yeah.
I think, unfortunately, the one thing I will say about the start of this movie is it's kind of slow. It is kind of slow.
It's kind of slow. There's maybe not. There's a lack of boxing in this film. Maybe.
There is a little bit too much, but too little boxing. But what is interesting is we get this whole point where he does decide. Eventually, we're going to talk about it in a minute. But he does decide to go back to fighting, and then he's kind of lackluster in his training, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it takes a few things to happen to kind of boost him into where he's going to go. But anyway, let's crack on with that. Talk to me about Act 2.
Sure. So, Act 2, The Call to Fight. As Rocky's financial troubles worsen and his prides begin to waver, the lure of the fight becomes irresistible. Apollo intensifies his taunts, labeling Rocky a fluke, which stokes the fire within Rocky. Despite Adrian's disapproval, Rocky agrees to the rematch, motivated by a desire to provide for his growing family and regain his sense of purpose. Rocky begins training under Mickey's guidance, but his efforts are half-hearted due to Adrian's strained support. The tension comes to a head when Adrian collapses due to pregnancy complications and is hospitalized, giving birth prematurely to their son. While Adrian and the baby recover, Adrian finally gives her blessing for Rocky to fight, reinvigorating his determination.
Yeah.
This middle bit, I think, was something which could have kind of make or break this film.
Oh, 100%.
Because you've got really complex sort of dynamics going on.
Mm-hmm.
Apollo sort of forced his hand to come back into boxing, otherwise his legacy will be gone. But even when he's back into training, going now into his second fight with Apollo, he's lacking, it's that case of like, well, I've done it the first time, but now I'm going to it the second time. I need like a different motivation.
Yeah. And so hear me out here. The thought process with this is, whenever you're trying to achieve something, you're climbing a mountain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't quite see the top of the mountain. And when you reach the top of the mountain, you're like, wow, I feel amazing because I did that. Rocky's mountain, in the first thing to overcome, is his, own self sort of loathing of, am I really good enough to be the best? Am I good enough to go the distance with the champ? Now he knows he is. So in the second movie, it's no longer can be about going the distance. It has to be, can I achieve something bigger? And what's really cool about this, there's a couple of things that are really important. And that is, the motivation becomes not about just going the distance or proving that he's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
The motivation comes directly from Adrian.
Mm-hmm.
And this was really important to me. It gets me every single time. Whenever I see that scene where she's holding the baby and she's like, "Can you do one thing for me?
Yeah.
Come closer." And she says, "Win." It makes me tear up.
Sure.
Every time I watch it.
Yeah.
Because it's perfect.
It's perfect.
There's
nothing.
Nothing.
That's the switch. That's the turning point of the entire movie.
And you get the bell. You get the first bell of like
Ding.
the bong, and
Mickey's
it's like,
like,
oh,
what
here
are
we
we
go.
waiting for? You know, like, what are we doing
Yeah.
here? Take us away. You know,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, it's absolutely right because it's like, you know, for him to do what he wants to do, it's like he can do it, but like without Adrian's support, he's he's incomplete. He needs that backing from Adrian to sort of know that he can fully send it. Because otherwise,
Yeah.
he's gonna be guilt ridden because he cares
Well,
about
and
Adrian.
there's all that stuff in the first act where Mickey's telling him he's not good enough to fight. He's got the bad eye. You know, he's questioning himself. He's wondering why he's doing it. He knows he's really only taking the rematch at first for the money.
Mm.
He's only taking it for the money, and then he starts to think, well, maybe I can do something else to win.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's something else I can do. So, I mean, for me, really special when Adrian tells him to win. Like I say, I've watched it 4 or 5 times. Every time I do, I get both the hair on the back of my neck stands up. I get goosebumps.
Sure.
Every time, and then I get that that feeling of real emotion, which is amazing because you can see it in Rocky.
Yeah.
There's an immediate
Yes.
change of, you know, now I want it, which is awesome.
That call for motivation is such a real thing in sports, and you see athletes struggle with that all the time. Whether it's like sometimes you see when an athlete in, let's say, professional sports, then they get their first big contract, you know, there's sometimes a decline in performance.
Something I wanted to ask you about in this is, first and foremost, did you feel like Apollo had started to develop more into a villain in Rocky 2 than in Rocky 1? Because of the way he's trying to motivate Rocky into making the fight.
100%. Because in Rocky 1, he's just a businessman. Like, he's just like, okay, his initial fight got cancelled. He saw an opportunity to use Rocky as a kind of like a representation of the American dream. That let's give this guy a chance to, you know, it's not about whether he wins or loses. The fact that, you know, he has the opportunity to fight at the biggest stage. It's a rags to riches story. It writes headlines. It's, you know, it's like great, you know, business deal. But then actually, like, the fight wasn't just an exhibition. It ended up being like a real fight. You know, Rocky ends up going the distance. So it's like now Apollo in the second film is really dealing with a great deal of insecurity because it's like now people are questioning actually whether or not he is as great as he really is, and if now his time is coming. So it's like, you know, he's now forced, you know, like, well, okay, well, I need a second fight with this guy. I'm going to really put him down now. Like I said, I was going to put him down because now my legacy's at stake. But obviously we know Rocky doesn't want a second fight initially. So this is when he now kind of has to kind of turn a page and sort of be a bit more of a villain by, you know, manipulating the media to kind of turn people against Rocky to essentially force Rocky into going back into the ring, which is kind of brilliantly done in terms of a writing point of view. But it definitely makes Apollo... I still like Apollo, but he's not someone you can necessarily enjoy as much. He's someone that you kind of now root against a lot more.
A little bit more, yeah, definitely. I've written in my notes here that he's not like kicking a dog evil, you know, like you would get in some films, but he has questionable morals to get his desired result. And I just thought to myself whilst you were saying all of that, I was like, oh yeah, I wonder how would it feel if you'd had that, if Rocky 2 was from Apollo's perspective. Would you completely justify what Apollo was doing because you were like, this, he's the champ, he should be seen as the champ. There
probably wouldn't have been a second fight if it wasn't for Apollo's actions, right?
But what's brilliant about that is, I was just thinking about it. I was like, I want to see Rocky 2 from Apollo's perspective, and I was like, wait a minute, that's just Rocky 3. I want to talk quickly about. I want to talk about Mickey, maybe even in depth here, because this movie has incredible work by Burgess Meredith as Mickey throughout the whole movie. He has that element of personal weakness again. He's got elements of, he transcends from being, because he is Rocky's coach and a mentor. But when Rocky's going through all of the challenge with Adrian being in a hospital, he's just there for Rocky as a friend. They're not training him. But he's going and sitting with him late at night in the chapel in the church, talking about, he's there with him all the time. He's visiting with him when he goes to see Adrian in the hospital.
Yeah,
he transcends being a coach to being, I would suggest, he's more of a friend in the second movie, which only strengthens their coaching and bond and relationship throughout the movie, right?
There's a bit of a Ken Miles, Carroll Shelby thing where, like, remember in Le Mans, where in Ford versus Ferrari, how like Ken Miles wasn't so focused about winning as much as he wanted the opportunity to be on that stage. He was promised the drive, not the win. And that was And I feel like with Mickey is that Mickey, who initially had a very difficult relationship with Rocky. Once Rocky got that invite, it was like, oh, like, okay, now I see you as, now you're not a bum. You've got and you've got this opportunity now, and it's like, I'm not sure what Mickey's opportunities have been in the terms of like being a coach for a contender.
Oh yeah.
So like now he wants that opportunity, and Rocky, because they had some arguments, and you can kind of they had to do some healing in terms of their relationship, and eventually, they got together and they had that fight. So it was like, but Mickey sort of saw Rocky's boxing journey is over. However, after all they've been through, you don't just then cut yourself off from that person. You remain close. If this was today, they would have started a podcast, right? Former athlete and coach who coached and played together. That relationship ends, but you still find ways to get close.
Yeah, the older coach mentor, coaches the younger athlete who's poor at talking and reading off the sheet. Into
That's
how
familiar,
to
right?
Be a better... completely. Okay. I think I really like how Mickey develops over the course of the movie. Something else that's really important to me throughout this film, or something that stuck out, like, I don't know if maybe stuck out like a sore thumb, was the theme of religion throughout the whole movie.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of time spent in churches. Whether that's the marriage of Rocky and Adrian, whether that's the point where just before the fight, Rocky drives over to the church and talks to the priest.
Can I ask your blessings, please?
Let's talk about Act 3, the rematch.
Yeah.
With Adrian's support, Rocky fully commits to his training, undergoing grueling preparations to face the seemingly unbeatable Apollo. On fight night, the atmosphere is electric, with Apollo determined to humiliate Rocky and end his career once and for all. The fight is brutal, showcasing Rocky's resilience and Apollo's technical skill. The two men push each other to their physical and emotional limits, and in the climactic 15th round, both fighters are knocked down. But Rocky manages to rise to his feet just before the count, whilst Apollo collapses. Rocky is declared the winner and the new heavyweight champion of the world. Overwhelmed with emotion, he dedicates his victory to Adrian, proclaiming his love for her in a heartfelt post-fight speech. In essence, we get 3 bits of training in this movie. We get the first training, which is really lackluster, kind of boring. Then we get training 2, which is, I think that's got the Go in the Distance music. And we get Rocky doing the skipping with his Win Rocky Win t-shirt on. Oh, fantastic. The training seems a little bit more brutal and a bit more demanding. It's, but Mickey, there's this focus, isn't there, on new level of coaching, different type of coaching, a more in-depth coaching, film review, tactical planning, a new type of challenge, and then the focus on redefining him. I made some notes here about Rocky, and then some of Mick's lines. He's like, Mick says, "We gotta change everything." He talks to him about chopping off his left arm if he tries to punch with it.
Sure.
And then he wants to go to work. He talks about being a greasy, fast Italian monster, which I think is which is a fantastic line. And then that one of my super favorite Rocky lines of all time. "You're gonna eat lightning and crap thunder."
So good.
Yeah, Mick's not necessarily the greatest technical boxing coach in the world, but this really starts to go into depth on how much knowledge he has, and that's why there's value to Rocky from
Yeah,
Mick, right?
I really enjoyed the difference in sort of the coaching between the first and second, because you get a sense of that the first film was really more about establishing a baseline of like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like if you want to survive in this ring, you need to get your fitness up to a certain amount, you need to be able to protect yourself a certain amount. But then the second film, where it's about actually trying to beat Apollo, is more about like, okay, we need you to kind of now match Apollo in terms of get to a similar speed, whether that's like with, tying his feet together. So he has to use his footwork. He has to, focus on his footwork more, even chasing the chicken, which is slightly rudimentary, but I suppose it's sort of like an homage to the honest background of someone from Philadelphia.
Well, you're slow. I mean, if we'd got you chasing a chicken at some point in your playing career, we might have got somewhere.
And and it's like there's definitely a lot more emphasis on weight training in the second film, and plyometrics. It's much more of like the first time was a baseline. This is now actually building now. And
100%.
So I think that's good. I think that's like that shows development, not just from like Rocky's character, but also like in terms of an athlete. You can kind of see from a profile point of view, you can see his development is it's not just him fighting Apollo again. It's like, okay, like you managed to last the 15 rounds the first time, but now you've actually got to try and like go on the offensive, which requires a more developed composition. So I thought that was brilliant. I thought they did a really good job with plan. That. Exactly.
But what's nice is, did you notice the juxtaposition of Mickey's way of doing things with how Duke does things for Apollo?
No.
We start to get more development.
We'll talk more about Duke then, because I feel like with Apollo, who's already won a million fights, it's like it's about maintenance for him. But explain to me what.
So Duke never has to show Apollo how to do anything physically. Everything for Duke is about talking to Apollo in a way that makes Apollo feel in the right way.
Ah, yes.
So in the middle of the film, there's positive self-talk is what we call it, but he's doing it through
affirmations. Yeah.
So there's a couple in there. Now at the start, early on in the movie, there's that point where Duke comes over to the desk and he's like leaning on the desk. He's like, "He's all wrong for us, baby. I saw you beat that man like I saw you beat no man ever beat before." He's like, the man kept coming for you. It's like, we do not need a man like that in our lives, which is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Duke sees the future. Duke knows what's going on. Duke knows we shouldn't do things and what we should be doing, we shouldn't be doing. But I also think that Duke's voice of reason, throughout the movie is brilliant, and his in-fight reaction and acting is incredible. That whole, like in Rocky 1 where he's like, "Get away from him," and you can see it. It's so much energy in the actor Tony Burton. I love it. Do you think the fighting in this second movie is better? Do you think the boxing's better?
I see. This is me and a bit of my sort of boxing ignorance, but I do find like Rocky's style of just taking every single punch to the face and not avoiding them a bit irritating. Just sort of like oosh, 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 his head knocking backwards every time he gets jabbed. And I'm like, put a hand up there, like, do something different, like, or try and swerve or anything, or tap the hand out the way. He's just taking it all, So I find that a bit irritating. This was an era which had obviously 15 rounds, not 12 rounds, and we see like in the last round, like these guys are barely standing.
Oh yeah.
They're just, even Apollo, the seasoned, conditioned, experienced Apollo, he's just like, it's like they're just exchanging, haymakers at each other and trying to see who goes down first, And
I wanted to ask you a question about how that fight ends, and I want to ask you because it's been so long since I watched it for the first time, and it might be quite a long time since you watched it for the first time, because I think that it's crafted in a way that is perfect. Because what you for you to be like, okay, it's Rocky 2, Rocky has to beat Apollo. And you think to yourself, well, he's going to beat him by knocking him down and standing over him. That's how you beat a man. But the reality of the fight is they're both down, and then it's purely about who has the heart,
guts,
and desire to get up one more time.
And yes, because I think the way that Rocky is that when he's going into a fight with the right headspace and the right level of focus and determination, he can't be beaten because the other fighter is relying on their ability to knock Rocky out, whereas Rocky's winning style is attrition and just like, I'm going to be the last one standing, no matter what you throw at me, no matter how good you are. And we will see that in the later films. Like when he's in the right headspace, it's big. It's a mental battle, really. Who wants it? And we can see Creed's about to get up, and he's just like, oh, I can't. He's totally spent. Whereas Rocky, just before the count of 10, gets to his feet. He has to use the rope to help him up. He has to really dig deep in order to do it. And it just shows ultimately Rocky's heart won over, Apollo.
Do you think that's what makes Rocky so appealing to people who love the movies? Is that, it's saying to us, you can do anything with just desire.
Well, let me ask you this. What is Rocky's number one line in the entire franchise? The line which is the most played, it's the most edited, put into like clips of things.
How winning is done, isn't it? It's the you got to. It's not
how
about
hard
it's not how you get hit. It's about how you get hit
and
keep moving forward.
Keep moving forward. That's it, right? That's Rocky.
Yeah. Couple of things about Act 3. So when Rocky's fighting and he's trying to get his speed up, do you know who he's facing when he's doing that sparring in the training ring at Mix? Do you know who he's sparring with?
I don't.
It's Roberto Duran himself.
Oh!
Yeah, it's actually Roberto Duran.
Wait, the guy
doing a little cameo.
The guy that Paz fought.
Not the guy who's not the guy. Yes, it's the guy who Vinny Pazienza fought. Yeah,
that's sick.
So it's the real Roberto Duran. There's a reason why Adrian's not at the boxing match at the end. Do you know why?
I guess like was she sick? Did something happen to the actress so they had to film like the TV?
She was filming another movie, so she
wow.
couldn't be at the movie. So then they wrote it in that she was having to stay home because of the baby, and that's why they did her reaction from home instead. And they filmed it, 8 months later or whatever.
Well, it makes sense. She's got a kid. They have to look after the kid, and she's still kind of resting from. I imagine after being in a coma, you kind of have to take it easy for a bit, right?
I don't know. You've been asleep for several days. You should be feeling great.
Jesus Christ.
Talk to me about tropes. Sorry,
tropes.
Go ahead.
So we established in the first Rocky film that Rocky as a series is like the trope father. It's got everything, and this film, is exactly the same. We've got lots of slow motion in the fight scenes. Really like stretching out certain key moments to kind of really like keep us engaged. And, it's like, you can't imagine a sports film without the use of slow motion at some point. Because it really like lets the audience know like this is a really big moment. We've got montages, again, lots of great montages, perhaps better, maybe better montages in the first film, potentially. Because they probably thought like, oh, okay, this montage thing is pretty good. When they were I imagine when they were looking back at Rocky 1 and, probably the trends that were caused by the kind of running up the stairs and stuff, in Philadelphia, thinking, oh, that's really cool. People really resonate with that. So I think they really wanted to kind of go into that more. And then from a boxing trope point of view, I don't think we'll ever be... when do you ever see a film where the final fight, protagonist doesn't get knocked down at some point?
Oh, it's almost always.
Because if they just sort of like win on points, get through to the end, blah blah blah, then maybe not. It's just that's boring. You have to have a kind of comeback within the fight, right? It's like in a sport like with points being scored, like in football, American whatever, like the team always has to come back from behind, right? Where they get some kind of trick,
Yeah, it's not the same if you just end up trouncing
right,
your opposition.
some sort of trick play at the end. Exactly. It's
So we've talked about this before about do something we originally talked about in the Champions of Cinema when we first started doing the podcast ages ago was, do they win because of a trick? And I wanted to just ask you this again. Do you think Rocky wins because he fights right-handed for the majority of the movie, or does it kind of not matter? I feel like it didn't make a huge difference throughout the movie.
Well, now we know that the reason that he fought right-handed was because of his chest surgery.
Mm-hmm.
But if that wasn't the case, and that was like a thing that they added, I guess it's just that's just a strategy thing, right? It's like, especially now, boxing is so strategy based. I think particularly now it's about like planning which rounds are you going to spend it in, which rounds you're going to sort of be passive in and not go too much, because it's a battle about energy conservation and winning the right rounds. A lot more fights these days are done on points, aren't they? Really, we don't get as many knockouts, especially or maybe there are more TKOs these days because the amount of times where
gets waved off.
The amount of times in this fight where it's like either one of them is completely defenseless, especially Rocky. It's just like, if this was in the 2020s, like even in the 2000s, they'd wave it off, or the coach would throw in their towel, to end the fight. I think. I mean, maybe, yeah. It's like, it was done so late, changing the style. It could have done something. I think Apollo was so tired, any style would have probably knocked him down. I think the whole point.
Yeah, maybe.
I think the fight was over from the point in the sense that like Apollo's whole strategy was he needed to knock out Rocky. If Rocky can make it to the end, then he'll be the last one standing because he's got more energy. He's got more heart. So I'd say
makes a lot of sense.
I'd say it comes down to. I feel like that was more of like a kind of the whole switching stances thing is more of like an interesting sort of how just like a maybe like a sort of trick play thing. Like, how can we make the fight more interesting? How can we add an element of like how do we out scheme talent sort of thing, right? Which is what underdogs often have to do.
We've got to say goodbye to a couple of characters from the first movie, and they're actually only in this movie now, so it's actually a perfect place for us to say goodbye to them. We don't see Gazzo after this movie. Mm-hmm. This is the end of Gazzo, and actually the actor passed away not too long after this one was made. So that's why I think
it makes sense as well, because after this film, Rocky definitely isn't a bum anymore.
He's transcended being a street guy.
He leaves the street completely. They get into a bigger
house.
Starts
living in a bit of a mansion.
He's a celebrity now, so it's like, why would he have any?
Starts thinking about buying robots.
Because celebrities never have anything have never any criminal activities.
No,
never.
No.
So why would Rocky be affiliated in any sort of crime? So
and we also get the end of Jurgens, who is the promoter for the very first fight, but he has one of the best lines in both movies, actually, and I'm going to just go through that line now. And he does that bit where he stood in the ring at the end of the first fight, and he says, "We have had the privilege of witnessing the greatest exhibition of guts and stamina in the history of the ring." Really like the character. Find him quite interesting. Shame, actually, because I think he died quite soon after Rocky 1, even. So the end of those two guys. I like both. I don't think they're massive characters. They're secondary characters. We're not losing anybody massive. But I think they're cool because really one of them is, central to Apollo's process and essential to Apollo's design. But the other is kind of central to Rocky's life because can you name any of Rocky's friends that aren't Paulie?
No.
And even Paulie's just a bastard most of the time.
Yeah.
There's that moment when Rocky goes and gives him the car, and he says, and later Paulie's like, "Oh, no need to thank me for the I don't know what it was that he got, sponsorship or something." It's like, no need to thank me for the... And Rocky's like, yeah, no need to thank me for the watch. It's like, he's an asshole. I've had friends like that as well that I think, probably were
They
assholes.
it's that thing about like, are these people givers or takers in your life? Do they give you something, or do they kind of leech off you in terms of maybe not in monetarily, but also like energy and time and favors? Like, what do they actually want you for? Do they want you for who you are as a friend, as a companion, or they want you for like help because you can do something which they can't?
I wanted to ask you about lines, and if you had any favourite lines in the movie, first and foremost. Is there anything that stuck out to you?
Probably the Adrian moment,
Win
it. Yeah, win. Just, I think that it's not much of like a line in terms of cleverness. It's just like a line of thought. Like, the significance of it is that was like, we always talk about in films, like going over the bump. It's like, Rocky's like, he's got no motivation. His wife is ill. It's like, what's he going to do? He's going to get killed by Apollo if he gets into the ring. But after that moment, it's like, well, that's it. It's like he's got everything now.
One word of motivation to get something done.
So it's kind of brilliant.
I've had that once or twice before, and I would say that I've had girlfriends or partners or whatever it is that if they tell me to go and win, a game that I'm coaching, the motivation is so hard to make it happen.
Nice.
Memorabilia lane. Is there anything from this movie that you want to take home?
The jacket, maybe. It's the jacket.
The tiger jacket. It's the jacket. Sopranos reference there.
Yeah.
I do like the tiger jacket. It's kind of weird, but it's kind of cool.
Kind of an homage to shadowing Eye of the Tiger.
It's foreshadowing the Eye of the Tiger, yeah.
That later.
I quite like his Trans Am car.
Yeah, that's a good car.
Yeah. And I really like the very simple 70s version of a homemade design t-shirt with the Win Rocky Win t-shirt, the blue with the red writing. Do you remember that when he's doing the jump?
Yes, yeah.
And for me, this is the moment when I want Rocky's ring attire. I want the black and yellow ring shorts, and I want the yellow and black ring, the yellow and black gown. Because oh my god, it's so cool.
That's the look for me. I think. Yeah, right. If I close my eyes and picture like Rocky's ring attire, that's what sounds right to me.
Yeah, if you wanted,
feels right.
If you're thinking like, I want to see Rocky versus Apollo. Apollo's wearing the Stars and Stripes shorts. Rocky's wearing the black and yellow.
Yeah.
Great question we always ask every week. Is this popcorn fun, or is it more about art for you?
It might be less art than the first one.
100%. I feel exactly the same.
Yeah.
So for me, I've said this is closer to entertainment. Sly, as a director, doesn't have the same vision for beauty unless it's about religious iconography. I think he does really well with the stuff about, feeling and emotion in this, but there's less about, making it just the whole thing look beautiful. It doesn't look as beautiful. What's your rating for this? Is it a champion? Is it a contender?
I'm going to say this one's a contender. Just because because I think Rocky 1's a champion. I do prefer Rocky 1. I guess it's a strong contender because it builds, it does so well to kind of, there isn't really much fall off between this and Rocky 1.
I mean, that's sort of wrapping us up really on Rocky 2.
Yeah.
And I hadn't watched this for a while. I actually got my DVD out and watched it on DVD, which felt really strange to watch it on DVD. But I really enjoyed it. And at no point really did I feel like it was going too slow. At no point did I feel like it was going too fast. Yes, I sometimes do feel like these movies can all do with a little bit more boxing in them. But I'm surprised. If you told me that if I hadn't done the research and known that Sylvester Stallone wrote and directed it, I would have thought that it had a better director in charge of it all. Potentially. Yeah. I think it's a really fun and enjoyable movie, and for the fact that it develops Rocky and Adrian's relationship, the fact that it develops Rocky and Mickey's relationship, and the fact that it develops Rocky and Apollo's relationship, which is going to become more important as we go into Rocky 3.
Mm-hmm.
This is almost the perfect sort of bridging movie between what we expect to be brilliant.
Throughout these films, we see a development of Rocky. You know, Rocky 1 is about his rags to riches, sort of. He's a bum on the street to, you know, going into, you know, having a contender shot. It's very much a solo story, whereas this film is much more about kind of now that personal struggle in terms of like, well, what is my purpose if I'm not in the ring? And sort of that realization that for him it's like being in the ring is the best thing he can do, you know. So it's about and it's challenging all this, you know, the personal and the relationship struggles that come with sort of doing something which not is necessarily in line with family goals and stuff. So I think it's good. It's a good next step for Rocky's journey.
Oh, talking about steps. I mean, this is one question I haven't asked you yet.
Nice.
Which of the Rocky run steps so far is your favourite? Step runs.
I still like the first one the most, just because it's
You're crazy.
Because he's by himself. Because it's like
it doesn't matter. This one's got kids in it. It's got kids running with him too.
I know, but I appreciate, you know, it's him being so close to the Philadelphia community who really have bought into him now as the kind of the hero of Philly. But like, it's like, come on, like whenever you type in like Rocky Steps, it's the first one that comes up. You know, that's the basis. That's the original.
Well, we shall see.
The second one is the remastered one. It's the kind of like, okay, let's change it a little bit, but like,
well, guess what? There's no steps in Rocky 2, Rocky 3, or Rocky 4. Yeah, we're not going to get any steps in those.
He's running in Siberia. That's why there's no steps.
Like the Siberian scorpion he is. That's right.
Oh God, we have to work on that. Okay.
James, if people want to reach out and find us, if they want to get in touch with us, what should they do?
Find us on all socials at Champions of Cinema.
And if you could, we would love for you to give us a rating of this episode. You know, on Spotify, give us a star rating. You know, write us a review below the episode. You can do that on Spotify or on YouTube. Tell us what you think your favourite moments within the Rocky movie are. Tell us what your favourite quote is. Tell us which Rocky Steps run you love the most, because we really want to.
And why it's the first one. Yeah.
Or why it's the second one.
Okay.
I'm excited to get into Rocky 3. Truly. I think Rocky 3 might be my favourite. There's a load of things going on that are really fun.
Not for me. I'm sort of like seeing Rocky 3 as like, I have to get through Rocky 3 to get to Rocky 4.
This obsession with Russia, honestly.
Oh, where's that come from? You know.
But no, I think the next one's got the most to offer. We have to.
It's been a while.
Flips in characters. You just wait. Just you wait.
Let's do it. Okay, fine.
You know, it's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you once again, everybody, for following us and for listening to the Champions of Cinema podcast. We've been Joe Walker and James Marshall, and this has been the Champions of Cinema podcast. See you next week.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.